This is not my first Michael Bratton rodeo.
No, I think
I've been on the Michael Bratton podcast, or that SEC, whatever you call that stupid thing. I suffered through a couple times.
Welcome in, latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on the Twitters. And there is our guy, the CFB Encyclopedia. That's what I call him. Stephen Lassan, Senior Editor, Athlon Sports. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
Oh, Mike, I'm doing great. What a crazy weekend. We've got the bowl game set. We've got the playoff set. We've got the portal. We've got coaching. I mean, my mind is just going like 180 miles an hour trying to still figure out what happened last weekend and try to make sense of what's to come. It's a crazy time in the world of college football. By the way, I love the new intro, by the way. That was funny.
Yeah, I figured I'd mix it up a little bit now that there's not all these. There is a lot going on, but there's not these games I got to focus on. I have opportunities to do some creative stuff there, so appreciate that, Stephen. Hopefully the cousins liked it as well. And like we were just talking a little, we'll tell you a little behind the scenes. Not that interesting, but Stephen loves to come prepared to these bad boys. He likes to know, what are we going to talk about? When are we going to talk about it? And even on this one, he knew the topics, but he's like, I don't even know how we're going to talk about half this stuff because it's changing by the minute. So we're going to hit on grades for every single team up to this point for the season. You know, obviously some teams are done in the SEC. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk the transfer portal. We're going to preview the college football playoff and the SEC bowl games, coaching news, Carson Beck injury news, a lot going on. So I don't want to delay any longer, Stephen. I want to always, though, remind the cousins, we're brought to you by MyBookie. Come on, MyBookie, the online sports book, mybookie.ag. That's the website. Go there, create an account. Create an account. Doesn't cost you a thing. It's absolutely free. But if you want to be so kind enough to put some money, initial deposit into your account, use that promo code THAT, SEC, THAT, when you throw in an initial deposit, and they will double it over at MyBookie online sportsbook today. So, Stephen, how you feeling about this college football playoff?
I think it's going to be interesting. I hate to be like give you kind of a super generic statement, but it is kind of interesting that we have talked about this format for almost like the better part of like 3 or 4 years, it feels like. And now that we have it, we actually see the 12-team bracket. We saw what the implications were of the regular season. It didn't slow down any of the debates, even though, you know, it's now 12 instead of 4. The debates will always continue about the last team in the field and what exactly the committee is using to rank teams to find the best or most deserving. So I'm my head is still kind of like trying to get wrapped around everything that we saw this year, but I do think, you know, I'm still a little kind of curious about what it means like long term, but it did feel like November was kind of more chaotic or maybe a little bit more intriguing than maybe we had before, especially with no divisions and conferences too. Felt like things were more wide open than usual.
Mm-hmm. And I gotta hand you credit, Stephen. That's why we like having you on, because you're always thinking 6 steps ahead, like a chess genius or something. But as soon as they announced this format, you came on this show and said, all right, this is great. This is great. We're going to get more teams in here. I get it. We're on board. But, oh, buddy, he was the first. I mean, go check the tape. It's there. He says the format for what they're doing is idiotic, and it's going to be a disaster. And that's how, again, all due respect to Boise, Arizona State, getting in here, but they have no business having a first round bye. Teams like Oregon and Georgia deserve. Heck, if we're going to do home field advantage, why does Oregon and Georgia, who battled all season and won the 2 best conferences, they don't get a home game? I mean, none of this makes sense. So, good news is, Stephen, they're going to reevaluate this format come January 20th, whenever the national championship game is. We are going to reevaluate this, and based on Alabama getting out, based on Oregon, say what you want, whether you think they're the best team or not, Oregon, the number 1 seed, arguably is going to have the toughest game in the quarterfinals. I mean, none of this makes any sense. So I think they're going to revamp the whole thing, and that may mean expansion. It may just mean fixing kind of the quirks of this thing. But if they called you in there, Stephen, and said, Stephen Lassan, fix this for us, the man who saw this years in advance being an issue, how would you fix it if let's say they stay at 12, even though they probably won't?
I think, first of all, I think there's a pretty strong likelihood that they expand to 14 just based upon some of the conversations that took place last time. I think the easiest thing that they could fix would be you can use your parameters to select the college football playoff teams, 7 at large and the 5 highest rated conference champions, but do that within the context of the top 25. And then once you have those teams, seed them 1 through 12. And that's your bracket. If Georgia and Texas are 2 of the best 4 teams in the country, and I think there's a pretty strong case for that, then they should get buys. And I think if this expands to 14, I think it's more likely that 2 teams only get buys. So I would just seed the teams straight up 1 through 12. And if you're Clemson and you're the last team in, you have to play that 5-12 game. If you're Arizona State and you're 10, yes, you're a conference champion, but your reward is getting in the field. It's not the bye week that they have over a more deserving team. So I think that's priority number 1. Also, get rid of the bowl sites in the second round quarterfinals. If you want to do it in the semifinals, that's fine. I'm all about protecting the top seeds here. If you're Oregon, you're Georgia, you're Texas, you run through the Big Ten SEC, and you're sitting there 13-0 or 12-1, whatever it is, you should get a home game. So I would get rid of the bowl sites in the second round, protect your top seeds, and that way, looking at Oregon's path this year, I mean, I think they got a gripe because Ohio State is the committee's 6th best team. If they have to play Tennessee, they're 7. And you're looking at Texas going, if you get past Clemson, they're ranked, I think, 17th, and Arizona State is, 15th? I mean, I would much rather be in Texas' shoes right now to get to the semifinals, right?
Absolutely. I think Texas and Georgia got the best 2 paths to, obviously the semifinals and hopefully the national championship. Although if you're not a Georgia or Texas fan, probably over that game already. But no, I think it, huge if Texas can beat Oregon, and who knows, it may not even be Oregon, but that'll be the toughest hurdle to get to the national championship for Texas. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be debating this for a long, long time. But hey, real quick, I hate to sidetrack here. I want to give a shout out. I saw him in the comments here. I had no idea, Stephen. Shout out cousin Tony, Canada. Said he's battling chemo. He's fighting it with everything he's got. So Tony, thoughts and prayers with you, man. And hopefully, if there's anything we could do, reach out to us. That SECpodcast@gmail.com. We're here for you, Tony. So keep fighting hard. And the other guy that always fights hard for all of us, Stephen, cousin JR. What a man. What a legend JR is. JR just gifted a membership to K. Jerry. Jerry, welcome to the family. And then Liquid, what a legend. What a legend. Liquid set up a Discord for all of us. So we're going to get that rolling here shortly. I have no idea what in the heck a Discord is, neither does Shane, but Liquid set it all up. So we're going to get that rolling pretty soon. He just gifted a membership to Big Buddy. Welcome to the family. We got Scott. Man, we got. Go ahead,
Mike. This is the rare time I actually know something in technology over you. I've been on Discord for. I feel like I'm like I'm running a up tempo offense over here for once.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to get you on our that SEC podcast Discord. Scott also gifted a membership to Gray God. So Gray God, welcome to the family. And man, the cousins are in a giving mood. Hopefully that gives Tony some strength there. But, all right. So, Stephen, where are we going to go first with this thing? Oh, I know exactly where we're going to go. Man, it's not sounding great. Not looking good. I hope I'm wrong. For Carson Beck. Georgia announced this week we all knew he was injured, but they announced today that he has suffered an elbow injury. Stephen has pointed out, many others, I'm sure the dogs are all aware, but just want everybody else to know, he was caught on the sideline of the SEC championship saying it doesn't look good. But again, maybe you don't want to read too much into what players are saying on the sidelines. They may have asked him about the chili con queso he had the night before. But Georgia has officially announced that he has an elbow injury, and Carson Beck and his family are exploring treatment options. So, just reading between the lines, you don't go explore other options if the doctors say, hey, you're good. You're going to be good in a couple weeks. So if he has suffered what is feared, it's called a UCL injury. If it's a tear, there's no shot he's playing. He'll have to have surgery. It's the Tommy John surgery, and hopefully he'll be back and better than ever and be the top pick in the NFL draft. But if it's just if it's a sprain, he could still go. But Steven and I were talking off air, and even if Carson Beck, and this does not mean that Carson Beck is not a good player. He's a hell of a player. But even if he doesn't go, if it's the Gunnar Stockton show the rest of the way, we both think that Georgia can win the national championship with Gunnar Stockton. What gives you the confidence to say that, Steven?
Because Kirby's going to print out every article that says the Dogs can't win it and stick it around the facility, and we know what kind of impact that's going to have on the Dogs the rest of the way, right? It's going to be like the most motivated team in the country. No, Mike, in all seriousness, I think the biggest thing that helps Georgia here is January 1st. That's when Georgia will actually have to play. They can sit back and see what happens against Indiana or Notre Dame, and then they will have basically a month to get ready. They have a month to basically get Gunnar Stockton ready to play. And so I think you can look at that performance in the SEC championship and say, yeah, he's going to have to play better for Georgia to win it all. But for a guy that was thrown into the fire in the SEC championship game with a game on the line, I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. And now you give him a chance to get comfortable as the number one quarterback. And also I thought Kirk Herbstreit made a really good point, like on the broadcast, and basically saying, like, once Stockton came in, like everybody else raised their level of play. And I think that's also what would give me optimism if I'm Georgia, which is this defense is capable of shutting people down. You've got Nate Frazier, ETN at running back, and your offensive line can get healthier and better over the next month as well. So between coaching, defense, and the collective at Georgia, I think they still have a chance to win it all. And I think just looking at the matchups, I mean, they would avoid Oregon or Texas until the national championship game if that's how it plays out, because I think those two teams are the biggest threats to Georgia, and that being Oregon and Texas, and you wouldn't see them until you get to January 20th at this point.
Right. And just more time to prepare. I mean, it's how difficult it is to be thrown into the action against arguably the SEC's best defense, and that's quite frankly what Texas was this regular season. If you want to look at the whole season, I think they were the best defense in the SEC. Thrown in there, you're down once again. You never taken serious snaps outside of Florida State, and we all know what a disaster it started that day, but I mean, all year they've been a disaster. 2024, but yeah, I mean that took some serious guts from Stockton. He sparked the team, and again, you can't just completely throw out pocket passers. That would be foolish. I mean, I think the greatest quarterback in this game's history, Tom Brady, he could run a lick, but this ain't NFL. This is college, and not 10 out of 10. Give me the more mobile option at quarterback. It changes the offense. You have to play 11 on 11. It's not 11 on 10 anymore. Again, this is not meant to throw Carson Beck under the bus, because I think he was playing really good coming into this championship, and a lot of the teammates weren't helping him to the level that they needed. But I think Gunnar Stockton can give them everything they need and add a lot to this offense. But like you said, with all the weapons, with the tight ends they have, it's and the defense, if they play like they did against Texas, buddy, look out. I think Georgia is the pick to win the national championship if they can get that level of defense for 3 consecutive games.
If the Georgia defense shows up that's played Texas 2 times now and shined in those games, Georgia can win and will win the national championship, especially if like Michael Williams and Jalen Walker, which I'm sure Steve Sarkisian's probably going to be happy to see them go to the NFL because of how dominant they've been against Georgia. But I think the chance to build the offense around Gunnar Stockton for the next 2 to 3 weeks should give Georgia a lot of confidence. But also, I think the moment wasn't too big for him. And I think that says a lot about kind of his potential and upside. I mean, he came in as a 4 or 5 star recruit, depending on where you looked. But the moment in the SEC championship game, when the big stage, the game was on the line, number 1 defense in the SEC, and he didn't blink, and he was a key part of the comeback. So I think that ought to give me confidence if I'm Georgia, is that, hey, you have the collective. He doesn't have to be Superman. He can just be part of the group. And you can also get him more comfortable over the next couple of weeks. And I just look at that path, seeing if they get Indiana or Notre Dame, they're going to be favored. They're going to be favored over Boise State, SMU, or Penn State. That is a really favorable path to getting back to the national championship game. And then if Gunnar Stockton is your quarterback, by then he's got 2 games under his belt and should even be more comfortable with the offense.
Mm-hmm. And we say all that, though, Stephen. We hyped up the dogs, which they deserve. They're SEC champs. Come on. But we're falling into the trap of 2024 where Ole Miss going to win out. They're going to make the college football playoff. There's no shot Alabama loses to Oklahoma. Come on, are you crazy? There's no shot Kentucky beats Ole Miss. Are you crazy? Audit. This is the season of upsets. And if I'm Georgia and Texas, I hope that doesn't continue. But quite honestly, I think it will. So now that we're getting this first ever 12-team playoff and it's seeded foolishly, I think that's just going to, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, Stephen, but it's probably going to give us like, I'm trying to think of the dumbest championship. Arizona State, SMU. Like that's probably going to be the national championship, just to screw with us one more time as we sit here and anoint Texas and Georgia as likely champion. Like we're going to complain that we're going to get round 3 and it'll be freaking Boise and Arizona State or something stupid.
Also, I know there will probably be people who hear this and have a massive amount of skepticism. First of all, I would say I agree with you. Like this year has just been so unpredictable that the odds are everyone that's picking a bracket and picking the favorites is probably going to look probably wrong in a few weeks. But I do think Notre Dame is equipped to give Georgia some trouble just because of how balanced they are. And, if we are talking like hypotheticals, like what if Gunnar Stockton does struggle? Notre Dame could be tricky, but also, I mean, I don't think it's also crazy to think that the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State makes a run in the playoff either. Like that game is the hardest one to figure out. And if you're Oregon, like you don't want to play either one of those teams, really. You'd rather be playing Arizona State or SMU. So kind of knocking the seeding there. But I think sort of buyer beware on the favorites because of how this season has played out.
Big money asks a big question. Will Florida State step in for Georgia now that they've lost their quarterback? But nope, not this year. Not this year.
Don't think Florida State has a quarterback who could start at Georgia tomorrow. I don't think DJU's coming through that door, right?
Nope. All right. Hey, so we'll have all kinds of time to talk these playoffs. So we're not going to go super in depth, but I did want to ask Stephen about specifically the SEC showdowns. Let's go one at a time. Clemson at Texas. It's going to be great to see old DKR there hosting a playoff game. Texas favored by 11, over under 51.5 total points. What's your early read on this and maybe areas that Texas can exploit Clemson and maybe if there are any areas that Texas maybe should be a little bit worried going up against Clemson?
I think the first thing that jumps out is Clemson's defense is not quite what we're used to seeing. And I think that gives Texas some opportunities here, whether it's on the ground or through the air. And I think if you're Texas, the one area that would worry you is Cade Klubnik, their quarterback, has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, or last 2 years when after they hired Garrett Riley as the offensive coordinator. So I think, in a game where, I think quarterback play is going to be so crucial here in the playoff. Clemson, if their defense isn't as good, they're going to have to offset that by getting better quarterback play by Cade Klubnik. And so Klubnik plus the weapons that Clemson has, I think can maybe make this interesting. If you're looking for kind of a drawback to Clemson's offense, it's got to be that offensive line. I mean, it has struggled like when they play Georgia, and I think when they play Texas, it will be an issue. So I think if you're a Texas fan, you go into this saying, hey, if you stop Cade Klubnik, I'm not sure that Clemson's defense, considering how it's played this year against Louisville, how it played against Georgia, how it played against South Carolina, how it stopped the run this year, I don't know they can slow down Texas, especially on the road. So I feel pretty good about Texas coming into this game, but stopping Cade Klubnik and don't allowing that Clemson offense to get hot through the air is probably going to be key for Texas.
Mm-hmm. Any surprise at it's the largest spread among the initial playoff games. Any surprise? Is that number too low? Is it too high? What's your thoughts on Texas being favored by 11?
I actually think that's about right, Mike. Clemson this year, when they lost to Louisville, they lost to South Carolina, they lost to Georgia. 3 of their biggest tests, they failed. And before beating SMU, their best win was against Pitt with a backup quarterback, and Pitt started 7-0, lost their last 5 games. So their resume was pretty soft coming into this year. And I also think that kind of gets at the breakdown that you and I were talking about, which is I don't think they're as good as they are on defense. Now, they do have some dudes still in the defensive line that can cause you trouble. So, you were asking me about concerns for Texas. Like maybe is their pass rush able to get to Ewers, create a turnover or something like that? But they're not as good on defense as they have been. And I think there are some questions about against like a top flight defense like Texas, are they going to be able to move the ball consistently? And I would probably say no. And that's why I think 11, maybe even higher, probably makes a lot of sense here.
All right. How about game? Doesn't change. Dying to watch here. Tennessee at Ohio State. Ohio State favored by 7.5. Over under 47.5. Matchups that favor Tennessee. Matchups that potentially favor Ohio State.
The first matchup that I've got my eye on is what happens at the line of scrimmage for Tennessee. Tennessee's defensive line can win some battles against Ohio State's offensive line. I think that is going to be crucial in how does Ohio State work around that? Because if you go back to the Michigan game, Michigan has 2 defensive tackles in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, and they're 2 of the better ones in the Big Ten. Mason Graham might be one of the first team All-America when we vote here in a few weeks. That defensive front caused Ohio State so much trouble because they have lost their starting left tackle and their starting center to injuries this year. Like you're probably your 2 most important positions, they're now out for the year. So how does Ohio State now with more time, how do they sort of game plan around that? And I think their biggest strength is going to be throwing the ball. I think one of the ways they lost against Michigan, they tried to play like man ball. They tried to prove they were tougher than Michigan. They didn't need to. Just let the quarterback, Will Howard, and the receivers get the ball in space because that's their biggest asset is all those weapons at receiver. So I think if you're Tennessee, the matchup you got to like is your defensive front is capable of getting after Ohio State's offensive line and Will Howard all day. I think if the flip side of that happens, if you're Tennessee, you have to be worried if Ohio State's passing game starts to click. And that's really the one that's going to determine it. Ohio State is very good on defense this year. They kind of gave up, I would say, a very bad time rush play to Michigan at the end of the game that sort of allowed Michigan to get the game-winning field goal. But they've been pretty stout on defense all year. So I think to look at it from a Tennessee perspective, I think you have to assume Dylan Sampson will find running lanes probably tough to find, which means what does Nico and these receivers do against an Ohio State secondary that's been pretty solid? But if you watch the Oregon game earlier this year, they are gettable. They gave up 32 points to Oregon. So I think there's some matchups there that favor Tennessee and also some ones that also I think Ohio State can take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, is it an oversimplification to say if Nico and company can get going in the passing game, that Tennessee is going to win this game, and if they can't, they won't, because certainly I know, we're all fixated on the last game, and Ohio State got embarrassed at home, so maybe they shouldn't even have this game. That's a different conversation. But you said it right there. I mean, they got a lot of weapons. Tennessee's got a really good defense, but still, I don't think this is going to be a first to 20 type ball game. I really don't. I think I think Tennessee is going to have to score to win this football game. What's your take on that?
I think on a matchup perspective, there's actually something that is not on the field that I wonder how it will impact Ohio State here. Is Ohio State the vibes? And that's kind of a weird thing to ask about. But if you saw the end of the Michigan-Ohio State game and see, they've lost a couple times to Michigan in a row. There's a lot of pressure on Ryan Day. If they, they're at home, if they start slow, they get booed. Like, how does that play out? I think the vibes at Ohio State are pretty bad right now. And to Ryan Day's credit, when they lost to Michigan a few years ago and they played Georgia in the Peach Bowl, they sort of tweak some things offensively. And I think they'll do that again here, which I think brings me to your point, which is I don't think you can assume this would be like a 17-13, 20-17 kind of game. Ohio State can win in sort of a slow kind of play it out way like that. But I think the fear would be if they're able to protect plus throw, they're going to score. So I think if you're Tennessee, you are going to need Nico and some of these receivers to hit on some big plays like you saw at Vanderbilt. It's almost like if Tennessee can get off to a fast start, if Nico hits a big play and you're winning on the defensive line of scrimmage, I think Tennessee can win this game. It's by far the most interesting of the first round games, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I ask this just from a stance of pure ignorance, Stephen, but do any of the teams in the Big Ten, do they have tempo that would match a Tennessee and Ole Miss? Because I'm just curious if Ohio State has seen that.
Definitely Oregon. Speed, tempo, I think would probably be your closest comparison, because Oregon's offensive coordinator is Will Stein. He's a former Louisville quarterback, and he's done a really nice job with that offense. But they do, with Dylan Gabriel, they are very capable of moving fast, like from snap to snap, and whether it's rush pass, they do a good job with no huddle stuff. What's interesting too is there's a lot of teams in here that, like in Ohio State, they are kind of versatile in the sense, because Ohio State's got Quinshad Judkins, they've got Travion Henderson, they can sort of play that bully ball, but with their offensive line being so banged up, I'm not sure they can. A lot of these teams in the Big Ten, maybe outside of Penn State too, like Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon are probably the ones I would say are most capable from a tempo perspective. Some of the other ones, like a Minnesota, like a Rutgers, are a little bit more slower paced Iowa teams.
Yeah, because that's all I think about. I didn't know they had to import offense to the Big Ten via Oregon. So, that was just something I was thinking about this afternoon.
And USC for most part.
All right. So again, like I said, we're going to be spending many a day breaking down these matchups, but that's just an early view of these upcoming round one playoff games featuring SEC teams. Cannot wait for it. Both the UTs battling here, one on the road, one at home. But hey, before we move on to bowl games, Stephen, you know what you could do this holiday season to get someone special in your life? Something? Public Rec. Come on, publicrec.com. Promo code SEC gets 20% off. What is this Public Rec? It is a clothing outfit that they do high class clothes here, Stephen. And I got a pair of their Daymaker pants. They feel like sweatpants. They look like designer pants. Cannot recommend them enough. You can get them in 10 different colors. You can get them actually sized, so it's not just small, medium, large. You tell them your waist size, your length. They make them to order just for you over at publicrec.com. Cannot recommend this enough. See what I did there? SEC is that promo code, 20% off. Real guys nobody likes wearing pants, is what I'm trying to sputter out here. But these Public Recs, I guarantee you'll like them. I wear them all the time, and now that it's getting cool out, It's a perfect opportunity to take care of one of these sponsors here of this week, publicrec.com. And most importantly, don't forget that promo code SEC for 20% off your entire order. Because I know Steven's like me. I guarantee you, he's wearing shorts right now. But if he had a pair of Public Rec, he'd be wearing them.
I have to admit, Mike, I guess this is the power of sponsorship on your show. It was the first time I heard of that company was when they advertised on your show. So I went online after you mentioned it and I checked out all their attire and thought, man, this would make some great Christmas presents. So I hope my dad and brother aren't watching this. Get some of that. Also was just thinking, if you are maybe, hypothetically like a coordinator interviewing for a job, you might want to go over to Public Rec and check out their attire, right? You could be looking good for your job interview this offseason if you're maybe in the SEC or somewhere else.
Exactly. That's what I think Dow Loggins did. So that's where we're going to go next to, we got bowl games coming up, and man, Steven, oh man, I know they're disappointed. Everybody's disappointed that didn't make the playoff, but it's got to bring a little bit of a smile to your face if you're the South Carolina Gamecocks, that what is it? What's the bowl? I know it's just cheeses. Is it Citrus Bowl? Citrus Bowl.
Citrus, yeah.
Turned around and said, stiff arm Heisman to you, Alabama. You ain't welcome here. We want the red hot Gamecocks, the best damn team in the SEC. That didn't quite make the playoff. The team that should have made it. They're there. They're playing Illinois. They're a 10.5-point favorite, but they're doing it without their offensive coordinator. So a lot of different angles here to tackle, Stephen. Thoughts on this matchup? I know Illinois is a ranked outfit, but thoughts on South Carolina, Illinois in the Citrus Bowl?
I think it has a chance to be one of the better bowl games this season, largely because I don't get the sense we're going to get a lot of opt-outs from Illinois. And Brett Bielema did a nice job with his team this year, 5-7 to 9-3. One of their losses was to Penn State early in the season. So they had a really nice year. And also, former Ole Miss quarterback Luke Altmaier has done a nice job over there at Illinois. He was one of the Big Ten's better quarterbacks this season. So they can score from an offensive perspective. What's interesting about this team, and thinking about Brett Bielema from Arkansas and Wisconsin, always pretty big on the line of scrimmage. And I would say this is probably not one of his better defensive, and they have a very experienced offensive line, but at times you could get to the Illinois quarterbacks with the pass rush. So not, I would say, Brett Bielema's best line of scrimmage team, but also from a win perspective, like I said, getting to 9, it much improved this year, but they are going to have a heck of a time trying to stop Lenore Sellers just because of how he ended the season. Maybe the long layoff cools them off a little bit. You certainly don't hope so if you're South Carolina, but I think there's a potential, Mike, to be one of the better bowl games just because both teams are coming into this game 9 wins, probably not a ton of opt-outs. And I think there's matchups on both sides that you could say, yeah, it'll probably be a pretty entertaining kind of back and forth game. These SEC Big Ten games in Florida, usually I think are probably must see at top of the bowl list.
Yeah. And I've already started to see a lot of buzz. Again, I get it. Disappointment, should be in the playoff. Their fans know all about it, but I'm seeing a lot of buzz and excitement for Gamecock fans to get down there. Florida Bowl, the best bowl that's not a playoff bowl is going to be here in the Citrus Bowl. And fair or not, you win a game like this. I know it's got nothing to do with the next season, but if you win it, and particularly if you win it in impressive fashion, that could really boost South Carolina in terms of places like where Stephen works, Athlon Sports. Come on, preseason top 10. I mean, they're going to be looked at as one of the teams that is going to be in the playoff hunt next season. So I think there's a lot on the line here, and it's interesting because you just don't know with opt-outs and things of that nature. But we've compounded it now because our offensive coordinator is Dow Loggins, is now Appalachian State head coach. So what does that do for the Gamecocks? And I know they've got who is it, Mike Shula, on staff as an analyst. I know he's been mentioned as a possible candidate. What's your thoughts on that? If that's not your guy, who do you think they should get? Because I personally, Stephen, I think first and foremost, you never hire a coach for a player, and I'm not saying you let sellers pick the coach or anything, but I think priority number one has got to be a guy that has a proven track record that he can continue to develop sellers, because if South Carolina is going to make the playoff next year, it's going to be because Sellers is just the badass that he is and continues to progress. And hell, he may win the Heisman. He's that good.
It's the Citrus Bowl is almost buying advanced stock. Like they're buying ahead by taking South Carolina over Alabama, because once I saw Alabama wasn't going to be in the playoff, I just kind of assumed they'd be in the Citrus Bowl just because that's Alabama. They'd get picked ahead of them. But it's also hard to argue, like, by taking South Carolina, you're sort of riding this wave of momentum and 9 wins and the potential to maybe have one of the preseason favorites, and I think he will be, to win the Heisman Trophy. So the Citrus Bowl really got a great draw here with this game. I think on Dow Loggins, I was pretty skeptical when he was hired, and I think full credit to him. He did a nice job this year, getting Lenore Sellers to this point with the development of the offense over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And it was clear early on in the season, if you watch South Carolina in game 1 or 2 to the end of it, how much better Sellers got more comfortable, and certainly the offense evolved because of that. And all the new pieces, I mean, having to overcome injuries on the offensive line last year, inconsistency at receiver at times. So I thought from a hire that was questionable, and I wondered why Shane Beamer was doing it, it ended up being okay. And so it almost makes you think, like, who are the obvious, like the least obvious candidates that we are thinking about? Because I don't think Loggins was necessarily priority number one when this job opened. But I think let's just kind of pie in the sky thinking here for South Carolina. There's a real opportunity here to go out and get a really good offensive coordinator, because you have a quarterback that people are going to want to work with. And I would imagine South Carolina will be hot in the portal. They are going to be a buzzy name because they have the quarterback. They have the type of team that can make the playoff next year. So for all the progress on offense, and yes, losing Loggins is definitely a concern if you're worried about like Lenore Sellers' development, you also have a chance to make this even better. You go out and hire the next guy who can help take his development to the next level. So I think there's an opportunity here for Shane Beamer to hire somebody who can help take this offense to an even better level next season. I know it's hard to lose someone and think they can get better on offense, but I actually think they can next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hey, and I mean, this is I'm just excited for what they could be, but they got to finish the deal, Stephen, because again, you get to 10 here, that'd be a hell of a season for the Gamecocks, particularly when you consider that's damn near double. The over-under win total was at 5.5 coming out of the preseason. So this is going to be an exciting game. Cannot wait to see who they hire to be offensive coordinator. I think that'll be one of the storylines going into the offseason. But we got a lot of games to hit, so trying to think next. How about maybe let's just go in order here. How about Oklahoma, Stephen? They're playing Navy. Need to update my schedules here. But Navy in, what is it, the Armed Forces Bowl, I believe. And I was kind of surprised because I know Navy's got one heck of an outstanding record, but Sooners favored 8.5 points. I think that speaks to the strength of the SEC that Sooners are more than a touchdown favorite in this ball game. But any thoughts on this one now that we've got an offensive coordinator? I know he's not going to be calling the plays or anything like that, but Jackson Arnold's gone, so I would imagine we're back to the Michael Hawkins show here.
Yeah, I think the concern for me for Oklahoma is, like, what's the motivation after a 6-6 season? Bowl games are all about motivation, like who wants it more. And I have no doubt that Navy is going to be a nightmare for this Oklahoma team. They're 8-3 this season. They play Army this Saturday. Of course, when you prepare for the option, it's probably a good thing to have a little bit extra time in the bowl game to get ready. So I think Navy's going to be a lot harder opponent than the spread indicates there. I do think if you're an Oklahoma fan, the one thing that gives you optimism about winning this game is that defensive front. The fact that Oklahoma has such a strong defensive line and can contain that Navy ground game. So interesting matchup just to see what the motivation level is for Oklahoma. What does the offense look like? And also, how do they handle this Navy option attack?
Yeah, because you can't have a losing record and your rival may win the damn national championship. I mean, it's not like 7-6. You're going to be like, well, we did it. We won. But, yeah, I mean, you just can't have that. So that's going to be fascinating. How about this one? Vanderbilt against Georgia Tech. All of a sudden, Steve, this looks like one of the better bowl matchups. At least that's a lot of the buzz I'm seeing here. Georgia Tech favored by 2.5 in the Birmingham Bowl. Oh, Birmingham's usually the worst bowl. Now it may be the best bowl, Stephen. What's your thoughts on Vandy and Georgia Tech?
Absolutely. I am really looking forward to this game. And I think for probably one of the biggest reasons is once you get higher on the bowl food chain, you start to see more opt-outs and also wonder what the rosters look like. I would bet that Diego Pavia probably plays in this game. And I think for Georgia Tech, Haynes King plays in this game too, which means that both teams are probably going to be at full strength. And also what's interesting is these two teams kind of tied together in a way because Vanderbilt knocked off Alabama. Georgia Tech almost knocked off Georgia. Like they've been almost like giant killers this season. They both run fun offenses. And like I said, with a full allotment of players, I think this could be a pretty entertaining game in the Birmingham Bowl. This is a really solid matchup.
All right. How about this one, Stephen? We got, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to laugh. We're going to get to transfer portal stuff here in a minute. But Arkansas, I don't even know if they still have a team, but they're favored, Stephen. How are they favored? They're favored by 2.5. Texas Tech must be awful. They're playing Texas Tech in, I believe, the Liberty Bowl down in Memphis. What thoughts on this one? And who in the heck are we going to put on the field for the Razorbacks?
I think you, me, and cousin Shane, if we have any eligibility left, are probably going to be headed to Memphis for this game because Arkansas's defense may need us, Mike, at this point. I think if you go back a year or two ago, you remember when Arkansas played Kansas in this game and how high scoring it was? Yeah, that's what we're probably looking at. We're probably looking at a high scoring affair here because Texas Tech averages almost 39 points a game, and how shorthanded Arkansas is on defense. Texas Tech has interim coordinators on both sides of the ball for this game. So I think offense is probably your best way to kind of sum up the Liberty Bowl right now.
All right. How about, this could be a fun one, Stephen. Vegas, baby, Vegas, A&M, Southern Cal, A&M, favored by 3. Lincoln Riley, let's get him out of here. Get him fired, hopefully, with another massive loss or two. But Southern Cal, actually, they played in this stadium once this season. They beat LSU, unfortunately. But could A&M, could they have better luck against Southern Cal? And again, we're going to get to some portal stuff, but A&M's, they've had a lot of guys hit the portal as well.
And not to mention the departures of Nick Scorton and I think Shamar Stewart to the NFL draft.
Right.
So 2 big pieces on that defensive line already declared for the NFL. I would assume probably not playing in this game. I do like A&M in this matchup. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was kind of rooting for Oklahoma here just to get the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma game back together. But A&M and USC should be a fun matchup. USC, the biggest strength they have is that offense. Good skill talent at receiver. Jaden Maavia emerged as the quarterback late in the season. Miller Moss hit the transfer portal. They can score, but their biggest weakness is their offensive line. So A&M, even with some departures, probably can control line of scrimmage. And USC's defense, while better, still not probably where you want it to be. So I think this A&M team favored and rightfully so in the Las Vegas Bowl.
All right, how about, oh man, I hate to do it to you, especially Bill Valentine if you're out there. How about Alabama, Stephen? In what they get? They get Birmingham Bowl? No, I'm sorry. They're in the ReliaQuest Bowl again. Is it Michigan 6-6? Why in the world is Alabama facing Michigan in a bowl game? I mean, we saw that last year, didn't we? But oh well. I guess that's life of the decaying dynasty. Or hell, we can't even call it a dynasty anymore. Decaying DeBoer over here. Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl against sorry-ass Michigan. What's your thoughts on that?
What a difference a year makes, right? I mean, these two teams meeting in the Rose Bowl, Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy versus Jalen Milroe. Yeah, a year later. I mean, how crazy it is to see Michigan at 7-5 and Alabama at 9-3, both out of the college football playoff. Both those teams, I think, fair to say, um, I think most expected to either be in the playoff or right near the bubble in the case of Michigan. This is a hard game to get a read on because I think the opt-outs are going to play such an impact here. Like Alabama, it does Jalen Milroe suit up one more time. Michigan has guys on defense, defensive front, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, their standout corner. I think the kind of takeaway I would have here is Michigan's defense, if it's intact, is very much capable of giving Alabama a lot of trouble. I would not expect them to score many points, though. Their offense is very limited. So if Jalen Milroe plays in this game, I suspect Alabama will probably take care of business. If he doesn't, I don't know, 13-10, 17-13 probably seems about right for whichever team wins this game.
Oh, man, I apologize to all the cousins out there. I forgot that I have uploaded the graphics for all these both games. But let's get to this one. Stephen Bad, Iowa, Missouri, Music City Bowl. Why in the world SEC got to keep playing Iowa? I can't remember how many years has it been since Iowa scored against an SEC team. Seems like they're getting shut out in all these bowl games. Kurt Ferentz, can't believe he's still employed, but I guess he doesn't have his son as the offensive coordinator. So that's the only thing saving him. Thoughts on this matchup, Stephen? Missouri, Iowa. Looks like Missouri is a field goal favorite here in Nashville.
Man, only a field goal seems quite low for this matchup. But I think it's fair to say if you kind of asked me about Iowa before last year's bowl game, you could almost cut and paste the same thing for this year too. To kind of put that into like different contexts, is like Dana Holgerson, who's now the Nebraska offensive coordinator, was hired at Nebraska during the season, and he was talking about Iowa, and he's like, I played these guys like back in like the 2000 Alamo Bowl, and they're running the same stuff. So they've been, I guess, something to be said about consistency. But this Iowa team is very much defense first and run the ball. They have five first downs in the game against Nebraska, but still found a way to win. So they need a turnover. They need some defense to probably win this game. I think as long as Missouri's offense doesn't turn the ball over, Brady Cook plays solid, pretty good reason to think that Missouri can sort of overcome Iowa's good defense to win. Also, worth noting, Iowa's best offensive player is Caleb Johnson, their running back. He's already declared for the NFL draft and won't play. So that's a big check in Missouri's favor.
Of course, the only offensive weapon they have declared. I mean, that's perfect for them. How about this one, Stephen? LSU, Baylor. The spread's only 2 though, so we could have us a ball game here. Thoughts on this matchup against old Dave Aranda, our former defensive coordinator when we won the national championship.
Yeah, the Dave Aranda Bowl in Texas. I think this one could also be one of the better matchups of the bowl season. I think the big question for LSU is whether or not Garrett Nussmeier plays. I think the early indication is that he's going to. Baylor, much improved this year. Dave Aranda came into the season on the hot seat, saved his job by getting to 8-4. They were much better on offense and on defense. So I think this is a pretty well-balanced team. Baylor's got the good passing game with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. He's a transfer, of course. And Aranda's defense ended up taking a big step forward. So for all the firepower that LSU has, LSU's defense is also going to have to make some stops to win in this game.
How about red hot Florida, Stephen, in a Gasparilla Bowl against Tulane? I thought Tulane was good, but then apparently their season has cratered here. But again, that's perfect because Florida's red hot. This could be a blowout here, perhaps. Florida, 12-point favorite. DJ Lagway going to light them up here, you think?
I think so. And also another huge check in the favor of Florida. Tulane's quarterback, Darian Mensah, entered the transfer portal. I does not appear to me that he is going to play unless he exits the portal in the next couple days. So Tulane did keep their head coach in John Sumrall, but at the same time, they have lost a couple pieces to the portal. They've also lost their last 2 games, Memphis and Army. They got pushed around by Army in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, and Memphis's high-scoring offense really gave them a lot of trouble 2 weeks ago. So I think this is a really great matchup for Florida. I mean, you've got all this momentum from the end of the season with the wins over Ole Miss and LSU and Florida State, and you now get a shorthanded Tulane team, basically, kind of a home game here for Florida down in Tampa. So I think I like the Gators here. If I was doing a confidence pool, I think Florida probably would be one of my top picks.
All right, final one here. Shout out Ole Miss, Duke in the Gator Bowl. And I apologize already, Steven. I thought this was going to be the damn opt-out bowl. But a lot of these Rebels have already come out and said, hey, we're playing. We want to win. We want to go out in the right way. I'd love to see it. Give you an indication that the culture much stronger than maybe appears from the outside looking in. Not to say that, well, clearly, I mean, I think they're the 3rd winningest program in the SEC the last 3 or 4 years. So clearly the program's good. But a lot of these guys are not free agents, one and done. They're here to finish the deal. Thoughts on Ole Miss Duke?
This is the David Cutcliffe Bowl. Of course, he was
right.
Duke going Ole Miss before that, but Duke had a nice season. Mike Elko left, of course, for Texas A&M. They got hit in the portal pretty hard, and they brought in a pretty heavy class, and they rebounded to 9-3. Really nice job by Manny Diaz this season at Duke. The sort of flip side of that is when you look at their wins, they're pretty soft. Elon, Northwestern, UConn, MTSU, North Carolina, Florida State, NC State, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. Not exactly the gauntlet there that they ran. So really nice season, but also maybe a little overinflated because of the opponents faced. Strengths of this team, Malik Murphy, Texas quarterback, very capable of hitting some big plays downfield. They also have a very good pass rush too. So that could cause Ole Miss some trouble on the offensive line. I think the thing here is if Ole Miss is motivated and they show up to play, they should be favored by a decent amount. And I think they should be able to finish the season off on a high note, not where they wanted, but still, I think this matchup's pretty favorable for Ole Miss.
Yeah, apologies. I think I didn't say the spread. 11.5, Ole Miss favored by. So, yeah, they are a big favorite in this ball game. But, all right, Steven, we're 52 minutes in yet. We haven't even hit the portal. So let's get to it. Let's not delay any longer. And I've been waiting. Shout out, Joe. We see you there. I wasn't trying to not answer your question. Off topic. Well, first, let me play a little. Thanks, cuz. Off topic. He gave us $20, Steven. Who should Auburn pick up in the portal? And I think he is specifically talking about quarterback, but maybe hit any other positions. And the speculation, I was just asking Steven about this off air before we started, and it's not great. We'll lead the way. Stanford quarterback Ashton Daniels. He has been predicted by Steve Nakos and Steve Wiltfog over at All 3 to land at Auburn. What's your thoughts on that, Steven?
I think if they're asking him to be the starter, that's probably a little bit too much. He did run for almost 700 yards this year at Stanford, very mobile, but also I think 12 interceptions, a little bit too inconsistent for me to be a high level starter in the SEC. Is he better than Peyton Thorne? I don't think so. I think based upon what I saw at Stanford, he's probably not as good. The question is, is he a better fit maybe in Hugh Freeze's scheme? I think to be determined. I think obviously with Auburn losing Garner and Hank Brown, you've got to have some depth there to sort of bridge the gap between Walker White and Deuce Knight. So I suspect that he's probably more for depth at this point. I think if you're asking him to be a starter in the SEC, I don't see that being much better for your offense. If I was Auburn, I would very much go into the quarterback pool again. I like Darian Minso, the quarterback at Tulane. I think he would be very high on my list. I think reading the tea leaves, Connor Wigman has been sort of telegraphed to Houston to go play there next year. Miller Moss is probably like the next highest rated one on the board. I think probably a pretty good pocket passer. So I think Miller Moss, Darian Minsa, maybe throw Caden Salter in there as well from Liberty. Of course, he's a former Tennessee signee. Those guys, I think, would be upgrades over an Ashton Daniels at quarterback. Looking at some of the other positions, I think like getting more depth like they did last year on the defensive line, especially on the interior, adding help at the tackles or offensive line. I think, you feel good probably about your receivers. Is there a running back they want to add with Jarquez Hunter departing? So it feels like Auburn has needs at quarterback, line of scrimmage, and maybe you could fill in a little bit at linebacker with some of the pieces that you're losing there too.
Yeah, and good thing they didn't make a bowl, so Hugh doesn't have to be distracted by that nonsense. So he can do recruiting, he can do the portal. He's got time on his hands. I kid, but really, I mean, that he said it, not me. But yeah, I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head. But any issue, Stephen, that I mean, they're landing all these recruits. That's great. You have to play these guys now, and they've been playing a lot of freshmen. They've been having success, but it seems like a tough sell moving forward. If you've already laid that blueprint, come here, play immediately, and then we're going to add transfers too. Transfers are coming in. The demand is to play. So are you going to play the young guys? You're going to play the transfers. Hugh has also said on record, I'm not comfortable with the transfer portal. I'm not good recruiting out of it. I'm not used to that. So I don't know. It's a mixed bag. But again, at the end of the day, don't be naive, folks. Don't be naive. When we all know it, in the transfer portal, it's money. Who's paying the most? Will they pay up? They said they weren't paying last year. You bet your ass they're paying this year, because if not, Hugh's going to be gone. So yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to see if it's not the best quarterback out of the portal. I don't know what they're doing, because they need one desperately to add to this roster. And I have said it. I know I'm the biggest Hugh Freeze troll out there, and that's rubbed off on Auburn. But I think if they have the right quarterback, this is a top 25 team, and I think they're poised for a big breakout season if they land the right quarterback.
So as a comparison, I thought it'd be interesting to look at Peyton Thorne versus Ashton Daniels in the QBR. And Peyton Thorne, this is ESPN's QBR, he was at 64 last year, and Daniels was at 50. And I should note, I mean, Stanford had good receivers this year. It wasn't like they had bad receivers and he was throwing to nobodies. Like, they had good receivers. So I'd look at that as he's got to be a bridge quarterback to somebody. The other thing is, and thinking ahead a little bit, it's going to be an interesting balance between finding the right answer at quarterback and immediately, because you're going to have the two younger quarterbacks competing, and you're going to have to find somebody to quickly bridge that gap. And if you bring in someone, like, what does it do to your quarterback room, of course, with the younger ones? But also there's a second portal window later this year. And I hate to be Mr. Negative here, but I have seen that if your quarterbacks aren't very good in the spring, some of the receivers on some of these teams will say, I'm out of here. I'm going to go find somewhere else to play. So I think they're in an interesting spot to where if you start a freshman and he struggles and you go 5-7 again, you're going to be even further set back, going into 2026. Like, you have to show some progress next year, which is why I think that, to me, Daniels is probably part one of two additions at quarterback, I would assume.
Right. And one guy you didn't mention, unless you did, I apologize, I misheard. Jackson Arnold. He has been linked possibly to Auburn, been linked to Georgia, but another Pete Dankos, he's kind of the portal guy over here, portal master. He has predicted Jackson Arnold to Mississippi State to go reunite with Jeff Lebby, who recruited him to Oklahoma. And let me ask you this, Stephen. Again, we're putting the cart in front of the horse here, but let's say Jackson Arnold does go to Mississippi State. Does Michael Van Buren go in the portal? What about Blake Shapen? Well, I believe Shapen needs a waiver to even have eligibility, but let's assume he does, because he was looking pretty good in the offense too. I would safely say that Michael Van Buren, he performed at a much higher level than Jackson Arnold this year, I thought. But again, is that Jeff Lebby and his quarterback friendly system and they had a lot of weapons, or because I say that, but I also think if I had my pick of one or the other, I would pick Jackson Arnold because I have seen enough of him. I think he's massively talented. I think it was coaching malpractice on the offensive side of the football at Oklahoma. They had offensive line issues. They had receiver issues. They don't have a damn tight end that's worthy of playing in the SEC. I've just called it like I see it. But you can't ask a quarterback to overcome all that. So I'm fine with him leaving. It may be an issue there next year as well. But I'm saying a lot here, Stephen. What's your thoughts on Mississippi State if they do add Jackson Arnold? What does that do to the quarterback room down there?
I think you have to assume somebody's leaving. And honestly, if I'm Hugh Freeze, I'm camping out in Starkville saying, which one of you guys wants to come start next year? Like, is it Blake Shapen or Michael Van Buren? Because both those guys would be nice additions. There is the X factor here that Van Buren could redshirt next year. Like, he played 10 games this year. He could redshirt next season. You let Shapen and Arnold battle it out. It's hard to accumulate quarterback depth though right now. I mean, I like I said, I would assume that if you bring in Jackson Arnold, somebody's probably transferring out of the program. I do think Jeff Lebby probably, if he goes after Jackson Arnold, that tells me something. That tells me that he thinks, and I think much like we do, that there's more there than he showed this season. I certainly think that Arnold is way more capable than he showed because of all the factors, the offensive transition, the receiver and offensive line injuries. I think it tells me that he probably would have confidence if he brings in Arnold and he's also knowing he loses one. That would probably tell me that he has a high degree of confidence that Jackson Arnold can play at a high level in the SEC. So I would be willing to take that gamble if I was Jeff Lebby. I would be willing to bring in Jackson Arnold and bank on that upside and him reaching that in the system that he was good at 2 years ago.
Yeah, he's been on record, Stephen. He thinks Jackson Arnold is the best quarterback he's worked with. And he's worked with Dylan Gabriel, number one team in the country. He's worked with Jackson Dart, several others. But that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. And they also signed their highest rated signee was a quarterback from the state of Mississippi. So, again, loaded quarterback room potentially down there in Mississippi State. And I did want to say that, speaking of Mississippi State, I've racked up, and this has probably been, they're telling me in the comments, Arkansas's guys have jumped in the portal since we started this. But SEC programs with 10 or more players in the portal right now. Mississippi State, 20. Arkansas, 19. Again, this was before we jumped on, so maybe into the 20s. Kentucky, 18. A&M, 13. LSU, 11. Oklahoma and Vanderbilt each have 10. So portal's been open for a day. And 1/5 of Mississippi State's roster is in that bad boy. But they're all going to add. Who knows? Some of these guys getting pushed out. Who knows? But
is it necessarily the worst thing at Mississippi State, though, to have so many of those guys? Like, not to be snarky about this. Like, they need an overhaul on the roster, right? Like, but
I would have liked that to have been last. I mean, I thought that's what we were doing last year. You know what I mean? So to be doing it 2 years in a row, I think is very, very troubling. And they're losing a lot of receivers, very productive receivers. I believe they're starting running back, I believe, as well. So I don't know. I don't know
Mario
that this
Craver's
is a good thing.
Big loss, I think.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Any over there's just so much we could do, and there's been very few commitments or anything, but any entrance into the portal that you think are particularly devastating to a team, perhaps?
I think what's happening at Arkansas is pretty interesting. And also throw Kentucky with Barry and Brown and Dane Key transferring, also Gavin Wimsatt and Keyshawn Silver. That's 4 contributors from this year's team are gone. But
right.
What's happening in Arkansas is really, just kind of confusing to me. And I think this gets at what you and I were talking about last week, which was, it felt like they had taken a step forward and gotten to 6 wins, and you bring back Sam Pittman. Bobby Petrino doesn't take the head coaching job at Charlotte. And it feels like, hey, if you can keep this team together and add to it and run it back, you've got a chance to take a step forward. And now you're looking at, you lost Luke Haas. You lost 2 potential starting offensive linemen. You've lost TJ Metcalf, some other guys on defense too. I mean, it's a really lengthy list of contributors that are gone from this team. So it's no longer about adding to that core. It's like you're almost going to have to rebuild around that core next season. So I think that's Arkansas is probably the team that's concerned me the most outside of Kentucky in the early portal stages.
Right. And do not be like peanut butter posse over here. He says all the Kentucky guys are bad character guys. Well, your coach's been there long enough. That's a lazy ass, stupid excuse because he's responsible for the culture. And if he's in, what is he in year 12, 13, Stephen? If the culture's bad, if it's full of bad culture guys, then that's on him. Don't blame the players. But here's more importantly, who are these teams that I've referenced, Stephen, that have the most guys in the portal? Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky. Those are the three leaders in the SEC, and throw in Vanderbilt at the tail end of that. I'm not specifically throwing Vanderbilt in here, but most specifically Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Kentucky. And what did I say leading up with this? This is about money. And if you're a booster at Mississippi State or Arkansas or Kentucky, you are not giving money to your collective, your NIL, to keep players, because the players you had, you ain't winning with anyway. So we're in a weird spot with this sport, and I'm just calling it what it is. You don't see a lot of South Carolina guys in the portal, do you? You don't see a lot of Florida guys in the portal, and these are teams that are not in the playoff because those boosters are paying up. Let's keep our guys. Let's build this momentum. It's the teams that are you're basically wanting a coaching change, or you're not sure about your coach. That's what I'm reading into this. One day into this thing, and I know Texas A&M's had a lot, so they don't fit this criteria. I don't think it's because they've lost confidence in Mike Elko. I think it's more about guys that probably played year one for Elko, and it was probably either the players or the coaches or a combination of both said, you know what, you just like Wigman, could be a really good player, but you're probably not going to play here. So that would be my read on A&M being at 13 there. But all this has to do with money. I promise you.
I think, and I 100% agree with you. I think something to keep in mind, and it goes along the same path there, is winning equals optimism. Optimism and hope equal donations. And so when you start to lose that, you start to lose confidence, which starts to decrease the donations, which adds even more problems in the NIL and roster space. And I mean, for every time when I see a coach say, hey, we don't want to play in the NIL space, I get really worried, because it's like, wherever you think about that, that's the rules, and everybody's playing on one level. And if you're choosing to play over here where you're not going to play, it's going to be tough to win at a high level, especially in the SEC. So I would say that kind of indicates probably where, like you said, some optimism, kind of where some of the negativity might be with some of these teams as we start to think about next year.
Mm-hmm. But let me ask you one curveball here. Let's say this one's for Cousin Shane. I think he's left the chat, but he shouldn't have. But let's say Tennessee beats Ohio State. I think it's a safe assumption, and I have obviously no information on Ohio State. I don't care about Ohio State, but I would say they'll go fire Ryan Day if that happens. If they lose in the first round, they have paid reportedly, 15, 20 plus million to win a national championship. If they get eliminated in the first round at home, I think Ryan Day's getting fired. And then what does that do? That opens the portal up for 30 days for his roster. I mean, could we see? I would imagine that roster is going to get rated, and it could, and then we'll have something crazy like Brian Kelly takes the Ohio State job, and then LSU. Just like we did last year. Could you see a domino effect that could lead to? You probably don't even want to consider this, Stephen, because you're already buried with work as it is. But an extension of the portal, extension of all this coaching dominoes.
100%. Because to your point, if Ryan Day loses to Tennessee, we'll see what Ross Bjork does as the athletic director at Ohio State. That's a pretty big decision for a guy who just got there in the job. But I mean, you lose to Michigan, you get bounced out of the playoff after having that kind of a profile roster. Yeah, I think it would, the groundswell would start to pick up there. Also, keep in mind, I mean, Caleb Downs could transfer. I mean, he went to Ohio State this year. Julian Sayin, a former top recruit at quarterback. I mean, they've got a really talented roster. So I think, to your point, I would say the window that we're going to see this week is probably like the first wave. I think we'll see a second wave when some of these bowl games get done. And then after that, like another coaching change or another domino like that. So I don't think we're done by any means on portal entries. I still think we got a long way to go. And a domino like that would really shake things up right away.
All right, so reading in between the lines of what you just said, Caleb Downs to Georgia, Julian Sayin to Auburn. Man, Nick Saban retirement just continues to haunt Alabama.
Jeremiah Smith to Georgia to
Tennessee. Come on, let's spread the love a little.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Tennessee needs a big time receiver, right?
All right. Anything else about the portal, Stephen? Before we get to the grades we're giving out for each SEC team.
Mike, I wanted to just mention Kentucky real quick because I would love to kind of get your thoughts on the quarterback situation for Kentucky. It seems like they're probably going to pursue a quarterback there. Obviously, Cutter Boley coming back next year, Gavin Wimsatt transferring, Brock Vandegrift. I'll be curious to see what kind of level of quarterback they can get because you already have a guy who's just played one season. You have Vandegrift, who's highly touted. The spots in the quarterback carousel are going to dry up quick. So what kind of level of quarterback can Kentucky attract is something I've got my eye on.
Right, and I'm looking at their list. I mean, obviously Dane Key, Chip Trainum, Barian Brown. I mean, a lot of the weapons there. Anthony Brown-Stevens. I mean, how are you going to attract someone if you don't have any weapons,
Yeah, that's a big question too. Is it's not only just quarterback now for Kentucky. It's like what we talked about last week. I feel like Kentucky's got a good foundation at running back next year, but receivers, O-line, and now quarterback are all questions going into next season. And on top of that, kind of a questionable offensive coordinator hire. We'll have to see if it gets any better from here. It just feels like, much like Arkansas, Kentucky, Auburn, what they do in the portals really the next couple weeks is going to dictate how I think good you feel going into the offseason.
Peanut Butter Posse's back, Stephen, with another awful take. He says Barian Brown does more harm than good. Doesn't he? Isn't he the all-time NCAA record holder in kick return touchdowns? So, I mean, what the hell are we doing? And oh yeah, is it LSU and Ole Miss beating down the door to sign him? I mean, you couldn't be more butthurt than this peanut butter man, but all right, keep him coming. All right, what? You know what he could use though, Stephen? Just like all these coaches losing players, all these teams that don't have any hope, I could provide it. Peanut butter, man. Here's what you need. You need some BetterHelp. This show's sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Go to BetterHelp.com/SEC. Get 10% off your first month over at BetterHelp. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, like you probably should, peanut butter, go. This is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and they will fit you with a licensed therapist, and you'll probably complain and talk about Stoops and what a poor job he's doing. And then you can switch at no extra charge over at BetterHelp. I mean, that's how great it is. You could switch every other day. You could talk about each one of your portal entries that you got just today, all 20 of them with 20 different licensed therapists over at BetterHelp at no extra charge. That's BetterHelp.com/SEC. Get 10% off the first month. Tell them we sent you by putting in that promo code SEC to get 10% off. BetterHelp. And yes, Sam Thomas, he says Stoops needs some BetterHelp. I think so. I think so as well. But all right, Stephen, grading 2024 football seasons for the SEC teams. And I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what you have to say because your list, I haven't seen it. I think it's going to be vastly different than mine because I know how logical and comprehensive and all that you are. And I'm ready to fire everybody. So let's just go alphabetical order. Grading each season. How about Alabama, Stephen? And I guess I should have asked before we even we've not discussed this. You just handing out a letter grade for each team, right?
I did. I handed out a letter grade, just kind of how I thought the season went, considering expectations, sort of what happened during the year. Some statistical stuff, obviously this season was so weird with the consistency of every team. I have been known to be a very kind grader, so there may be
Right.
some kindness in my grades, but yeah, it was really just based upon what happened this year, letter grades.
Okay, good. Because I'm going completely opposite. So we'll go Alabama. What is your grade for them Crimson Tide, year one, Caleb DeBoer?
Mike, I have to tell you, this was probably the hardest team for me to grade. I considered giving them a C. I settled on a B minus. So, so
B minus, Stephen. I debated an F. What are we talking about here? This is Alabama. This is a top 5 roster, and we're sitting our ass in the. We didn't even make the Cheez-It Bowl passed on us, Stephen. The Cheez-It Bowl passed on us, so we can go to ReliaQuest. I don't even know what the hell that is to face 6-6 Michigan. Give them a D, and hell, it would have been an F, but they beat Georgia. That's the only thing they did right. I mean, they beat LSU. LSU sucks. They didn't lose the Iron Bowl. But Auburn was awful too. So, this is a hard D. And again, I'm grading on a curve. This is mighty Alabama. This is the best damn dynasty I think in college football history. The greatest coach. I get it. Expectations through the roof. Tough for old DeBoer, but he failed. He failed epically. I'm talking myself into an F, but I'm gonna leave it at a D. I give him a D.
So ReliaQuest is a cybersecurity form. Perhaps they could have used a little bit more cybersecurity in those game plans when they played Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, because it's clear that they needed a different one. I think the reason why I gave him a B minus, and like I said, I considered a C because, like you said, Mike, I mean, high expectations, a roster capable of making the college football playoff. And kind of one of the reasons that salvaged it for me was, like you said, wins over Georgia, South Carolina, Missouri, LSU, all top 25 or top 30 type teams, including LSU. And they beat Auburn at the end of the season. So it felt like the good moments, this being Georgia and LSU, were really, really good. And the bad moments, Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, were really, really bad. They were way more inconsistent than they ever were under Nick Saban.
All right. How about Arkansas, Stephen? What are you giving them Razorbacks?
I gave Arkansas a C. So I felt like this was a step forward for Arkansas. Obviously, Sam Pittman coached his way off the hot seat this year. The expectations were under 6 victories, and they got to 6 victories. That win over Tennessee was huge. But also, it felt like a little bit of missed opportunity, especially looking at that game against Oklahoma State. They had some opportunities to close the door and get to 7 wins, maybe even a little bit higher, thinking about the Texas A&M game. They just couldn't close the door a couple times. So it was kind of same old, same old. If you want to look at statistics too for Arkansas, the offense was much better. 4.5 yards per play last season, 5.9 under Bobby Petrino this year. So offense was better, good upset, but also I think still something to be desired in a 6-6 season.
All right. Yeah. Well, this one, you nailed it, Stephen. This is exactly where I went C. And again, we're grading on a different standard. Was Arkansas expected to go to the college football playoff? Certainly not. But their win total was only 5.5, so they've exceeded that. They went to a bowl game. I think that was kind of the goal. You beat Tennessee. How I'll never know. With backup quarterback, backup running back, you got that done. That was tremendous. That looked like a program-defining win. Of course, it wasn't. But again, a lot of issues. You hit on Oklahoma State. That looks awful now, but at the time, that was a ranked team. Again, I'm a big believer that momentum in college football is real. Oklahoma State, they had some juice, they had some momentum. Still, no excuse. You should have won that game. Could have won A&M. Had your opportunities against Texas. I didn't feel like you were ever going to really beat Texas, but you had your opportunities. So you kind of blew every game that, except for Auburn. Auburn kind of blew it for you. But I don't know. I'm trying not to look at the portal. I'm not looking at any of that for this grade. I'm looking at just the results on the field, average. But again, you exceeded slightly. So C, I think, is a fair grade for Arkansas this year.
That win over Tennessee is doing a lot of work for Arkansas, right? Because otherwise, I mean, they finished 5-7. Also, probably what keeps Tennessee from hosting a first round playoff game was that loss to Arkansas.
God, why'd you say that?
And-
also it probably kept Sam Pittman. I mean, I know it did. It kept him employed too.
Also, probably knocked Tennessee out of the SEC championship game too. I think fair to say, or at least having a better chance at it.
No, I agree with Shane on this one. They wanted the rest, so
Yeah.
it was actually brilliant by Tennessee.
Yeah,
Of course, they didn't want to go to Ohio State, but all right. How about Auburn, Steve? Let's see. Let's see you massage this into a B plus or something crazy for old Hugh, going 5-7 and completely face planting till he beat A&M. But that's about the only nice thing I can say.
Mike, this grade was tracking to be an F until Hugh texted me after the Texas A&M game, and the win over Texas A&M bumped it up to a D minus. So I give Auburn a D minus. I seriously considered an F, but the A&M victory kind of bumped it up. They lost 4 games by 10 points or less. Their offense was worse this year than it was last year. And other than accumulating a bunch of talent, I'm struggling to sort of find like a lot of optimism here for Auburn in what happened this season.
Upset of the season, Steven. You've got a lower grade than I do. I went D as well, but I didn't give him the minus. So yeah, I mean, everything you said, completely blew Cal. I mean, all these games, Cal, I don't think I've ever seen a team blow this many games. Cal, Arkansas was a self-destruction. I mean, Oklahoma was the worst of all of them with the Kip 6. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
And then they sent Brady Cook to the hospital. He trots back on the field and wins a football game. I mean, it was just one devastating result after the other. But I give Hugh and company. I don't really give it to Hugh. I give it to the players. I give them credit. I give Peyton Thorne credit for not going in the tank. The Kentucky game, that was one. Stephen, had they lost that, I think they probably would have lost A&M, and Hugh Freeze is probably fired. I mean, maybe not, but I think it would have been close if they went 3-9. I mean, I don't know how you could justify bringing him back, but that win again, and I'm not very impressed with it because Kentucky's so awful. But the A&M win that you referenced, that was huge. That was perhaps a turning point. And then of course they look like they reverted back to their old form against the Iron Bowl. That was not really competitive. And I loved Hugh blaming Jarquez for throwing a pick that they never should have called that damn play. But yeah, give me a D for Auburn. This was off. The best thing was recruiting, and I'm not grading here recruiting. I'm grading on the field results.
It has felt like a lot of one step back or one step forward, 2 steps back at times. And certainly it felt like after A&M, they had a chance against a vulnerable Alabama team this year and then got beat by 14 points. So it feels like 2 years into this, like we said, they've got some talent, they've done recruiting, but hasn't really amounted to anything except for a very bad loss in the Music City Bowl and a win over Texas A&M in overtime.
Matt, comment of the night, Matt Beard. Giving Hugh Freeze your phone number was the first mistake, Stephen. All right, how about that Florida Gators, Stephen? I bet had we done this exercise 4 weeks ago, this would have been a very different grade for you.
I am giving Florida a B minus. Mike, to your point, I would have probably given this team a significantly different grade a few weeks ago, but the late season surge beating Ole Miss, LSU, Florida State, combined with Billy Napier working his way off the hot seat, I think just a completely different team with DJ Lagway at quarterback. And also 2 things. I like the way that this team stuck together after getting pounded by Miami, losing to Texas A&M, kind of wondered if they would fall apart. They stuck together. And also the defense, 7.4 yards per play allowed in SEC games last year. They got it down to 5.7 this year. That is a big step forward in the right direction.
Can you deny or confirm this? Apologies, I've got sidetracked here. Citizen X, Stephen, he says, Hugh Freeze favorite emoji he sends you, Stephen. Is it the freezing freeze thing? Is that what he's sending you all the time?
Oh yeah.
No, but I liked what you had to say there. I'm gonna go again. I thought you were I thought you were the kind grader. I'm giving Florida a B plus, Stephen. Again, I certainly thought Billy Napier was going to get fired after A&M. I thought after, scared money don't make money, whatever. I mean, he was scared as hell. Tennessee should have went for 2, would have won that football game. That was gutless, but they turned it around. And again, I don't know. Here's the crazy thing. Again, I'm giving a B plus. End of the season, tremendous. I didn't pick them to beat LSU. I certainly didn't pick them. I picked Ole Miss to beat them by like 30 points. I thought it was going to be a crushing. Ole Miss had everything in front of them, yet the Gators got it done. And I think those 2 weeks, if they go on, let's say they reach the playoff next year, which that would have sounded insane about 6 weeks ago. But with DJ Lagway and what they're poised to add potentially in the portal, I think is that again, that's 7-5 to playoff because you're still going to get all these teams next year. That may be a reach, but you could take a significant step next year. But having said all that, Stephen, and again, I'm trying not to be a hater because I'm trying to give people credit where credit's due. Are you fully bought in on Billy Napier? And I'm not saying you're like ready to fire the guy or anything like that if he loses one game, but 2-3 weeks of solid performance, I don't know that it erases 2.5 years of awful coaching.
That is a good question. I think one reason to believe in Billy Napier is that he's got the backing of the most important man in Gainesville and DJ Lagway. I think that's probably the biggest reason to believe in Florida is probably his emergence next year. I think what you're getting at, though, is something that is a little concerning, is that sometimes it's like if you're losing, it's one thing. It's also losing with some of the head-scratching mistakes that you saw, like the special team stuff at times, scared money don't make money, but also coaching scared at times. So I would say fully bought in, but I think DJ Lagway is an eraser for some of those mistakes, if you will.
Right. And I would also say, I mean, I guess here's how I'd spin it if I was a Florida fan. Never again, not only Florida, but any of these teams that consider them the best of the best in the SEC or should be competing for championships and stuff. You never want to hire a guy that's got to like learn on the job. And I don't think that was the expectation when you hired Napier because he did so well record-wise at Louisiana. But maybe it was just a learning curve, and now he's figured it out.
Yeah,
because there was a lot of mistakes that I would not have tolerated. But again, he's out. Point being, he's come out the other side, and maybe that'll stop. But if it doesn't, we got a real problem next year.
The first loss or two will be very interesting next year because it'll only take one bad showing to move back on the hot seat.
Mm-hmm. All right, how about them Georgia? Oh no.
Mike, I am giving Georgia an A. I don't think any team in the SEC necessarily deserved an A+ this year, but if any team did, I think you would have to give it to Georgia. And certainly taking into account the week-to-week inconsistency that we saw, but also toughest schedule arguably in the country. They navigated it by beating Texas twice, including once in Austin. They beat Tennessee, and of course, they won the SEC championship. And I like the fact that each time this team's back was against the wall, they responded. Whether it was against Georgia Tech, it was after they lost to Ole Miss. Definitely a flawed team, but I think also the potential, if they can iron out the week-to-week inconsistency, of course, Carson Beck's injury, the SEC champions, I think, can still get to the end of the season as the national champion, despite everything that's happened this year.
Right. Well, here's another one, Stephen. I'm a kinder greater than you. Give me an A+. Again, I think we kind of got fooled by the schedule and just how daunting it was and them losing a couple games. And again, we never wrote Georgia off necessarily, but never kind of viewed them as a national championship contender, quite honestly, because I didn't quite see that from them, but I'm starting to see it now. It seems like they're getting better. albeit that Ole Miss game kind of scared me. But that Tennessee game, that's when it kind of clicked. It seemingly. Of course, I guess then you could say, well, how they almost lost to Georgia Tech, but it doesn't matter what they almost did. It matters what they did, and what they did was they won. Adversity continues to strike. Kirby with his 9 timeouts in overtime. I mean, it's annoying, but it's a stroke of genius. And I think he outcoached Sark with his backup quarterback. A+, Georgia Bulldogs. I think they're the pick to win it all. But again, I should probably stop saying that because this has been the season where the pick to win it all usually loses their next damn game. So let's say favored to go to the national championship. That's what you want. You just want to get there and then I'll pick the other team because I can't pick a Georgia game to save my life anyway.
So one interesting stat on Georgia, they averaged under 30 points a game in the SEC this year. First time since 2019. The offense has been rolling. This year wasn't quite as good in SEC play.
I blame Bobo.
Yeah, fire Bobo.
All right, how about Kentucky, Stephen? Where are you going to go? I have a feeling I know where you're going to go on this one.
Mike, this was one of the easier grades to do. I gave Kentucky an F. 4-8 overall, 1-7 in the SEC, 1 fourth down pass away from being winless in SEC play this season. Also, only they had 2 losses, Vanderbilt and Georgia by 1 score. They did not score more than 20 points in an SEC game this year. Just horrific offensive play. And for the most part, in games within the SEC, they were pretty much controlled. So for me, this was an easy F.
Well, I didn't even know this was a grade, but I'm following Trey here. F- for Kentucky. I was prepared to give an F, but Trey has convinced me that F- is the way to go. Just everything you said. I mean, I believe it or not, this is because of Shane. This was his team. This was his preseason pick. People forget the ones you miss. But he said could be this year's Missouri. It was this year Vanderbilt is what Kentucky was. Just awful. I think the most disappointing thing was the defense. Defense came apart at the seams. Offense has been a train wreck for a while, and it's just now kind of finally caught up to them. But I don't know. I don't even know how to sell hope here, Stephen, because I don't know. We get the same schedule next year, except we're going to probably We'll be going to Georgia. We'll be going to Auburn, which should be much improved. But at least I guess we could spin it and say, well, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, all perhaps playoff contenders. We're getting them all. So if you're a season ticket holder, you're going to see a lot of good teams. That's about literally the only spin I can have for Kentucky. I think we're done here, and we should go out and hire John Summerall as soon as we possibly can.
I think John Summerall might almost be increasing his stock too high for Kentucky. And it seems weird to say that because I'm sure the heartstrings are going to pull for him to come back to Kentucky. But if he keeps winning and some of these other SEC jobs open, like an LSU, like a Florida, Auburn, or whatever, it's going to be tough to turn down some of those other high-profile jobs. But Mike, to your point, I mean, Deion Walker's leaving. You've got quarterback questions. You've got receiver questions. You got offensive line. I mean, the list of questions is pretty lengthy right now for Kentucky. It's going to be really, really hard to sell optimism this offseason, barring some sort of massive portal class that really changes the whole dynamic for Kentucky.
Yep, and Liquid's got the $1 million question. How is he Mark Stoops still employed? Well, $44 million buyout. That's how. And he's already said, I ain't walking away from it. And I know enough about the Kentucky AD to know he ain't paying a cent of it. So might be here a while. All right, let's go LSU. Stephen, what do you think for them LSU Tigers?
So I expected LSU to regress this year without Jaden Daniels and, of course, some of the other pieces and questions they had coming into this year. But at 8-4, I had to grade them as a C. I gave them as a C for this season, Mike. They lost the season opener again. Then they kind of picked up some good wins, Ole Miss, South Carolina. But those 3 consecutive losses later in the season derailed any hope of going to the playoff. And the big question coming into this year was you knew that you were going to not be as good offensively as you were last season? And could you offset that with a better run game and defense? And so far, not yet. The defense got a little bit better in SEC play, but the offense went from averaging almost 46 points a game to about 30 this year. So significant decrease on the stat sheet. And then those 3 losses later in the year kind of feels a little disappointing to me. And that's why I went as a C.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Stephen. This is exactly what I had. Basically the same thing you were saying. I mean, I thought it would be a big step back. Quite frankly, I thought LSU would be a little bit worse than we saw. And perhaps they were, because they cheated to beat South. Well, they didn't cheat. The refs cheated them to beat South Carolina. So really, I count that as a loss. Ole Miss, they had no business winning, but they found a way, so credit them. And then, they suckered me in by that point in time. And I was thinking, okay, this is a hell of a team here, particularly after that Arkansas. I was like, man, they got us a defense down here. Now we're cooking. Then they completely fell apart. And then I picked against them the last. So, I mean, I can't read LSU this year. That's what it is. So I'm giving them a C. This is borderline what I thought. Defense got a little bit better. Offense got much worse. Nussmeier was better than I thought. Still can't run the ball. And that is a major, major, major red flag. And now we got Brian Kelly out here complaining that players just want to get paid while he's making $100 million. How ironical. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that LSU is ever going to do anything of significance with Brian. I've come around to the people, the domers that have said this guy's a joke. He'll never get you where you want to go. I'm starting to believe him.
Also, I know we're not grading on recruiting or vibes, but missing out on Bryce Underwood was a big deal, because that was one of the kind of the big sort of pins in this whole season, is that, yeah, you may navigate it to 8-4, but there's this quarterback coming in who could be really, really good in a year or two, and now he's at Michigan. So you kind of whiffed on him. Disappointing season. Now you have all these doubts, kind of where they go. I mean, shoot. I mean, fire Brian Kelly chance at your home stadium at the end of the year. That does not portend good things for 2025 right now.
And it's only going to be exponentially worse if Nussmeier goes pro, which he could possibly do. So they'll just have to add someone out of the portal
next year too, right?
At Clemson,
right?
Yeah, not a neutral site. So
yeah,
good Lord. So, and we know how they are. They're fine, Steven. They do well at openers under Brian Kelly. All right, let's do Ole Miss, Steven. And again, we're grading on the curve. Interested to see what you got for them Rebels.
Mike, I gave Ole Miss a B, and a little disappointing, certainly. I think for me, for Ole Miss this season, I had high expectations for this team with the talent, with what they did last year, the schedule. Everything said you should make the college football playoff. So giving them a B might almost be too kind. For the team, this was supposed to be the last dance, going to the playoff. They didn't get there. I think missed opportunities is the best way to sum it up, because they are literally 2 plays away from having one loss in SEC play, and the stat sheet, being at the top of the SEC in scoring offense and defense. This was a really solid team all around, but it just didn't translate into the thing that they were aiming for in the college football playoff.
Yeah, well, all right. Yeah, so you have turned back into the right. Overgrader. This is an F, Stephen. This is an F. 9-3, ain't cutting it. I thought this was the team that could win the national championship. I mean, just as recently as 3 weeks ago, after they whooped Georgia up and down the field, they blew it. They blew it big time. To not even make the playoff is an epic, epic disaster. And I've heard some concerning things down there, Stephen. How about this? I have it on trusted sources. He was going to Florida. Lane Kiffin was going to take that job. Of course, never in a million years were they going to offer it. Billy Napier whooped his ass. But so I don't know. He was distracted with that. I heard this too. This is pretty juicy. And I trust the person that told me this. Right before the LSU game, Stephen, Lane Kiffin moping around the facility and said something to the effect of his girlfriend, his 20-something-year-old girlfriend broke up with him. He's walking around moping around. He said, it's been 17 days since we got broken up. And someone said, Lane, you know LSU's tomorrow. Get your head out of your ass. Well, we all know what happened. You lost that game. So this is an F. This is Lane Whiffen for life. Everything I just told you is 100% true. This is disgusting. I mean, they should have I'm just so angry, Steven, because they bare minimum should have made the playoff with this roster. And again, look at their losses. I mean, Kentucky, awful. Florida's not awful. They were red hot. I will excuse that one on the road, but you dominated LSU until the overtime. I mean, just win one of those and you're in. And look, you kicked South Carolina's ass. You're the last team to beat them. You beat Georgia. You absolutely whooped Arkansas. I mean, this was a waste. This is a F.
I tell you, Mike, the team that frustrates me the most this season is Ole Miss because of the upside for this team. Was if they stop Kentucky on fourth down, they're probably in the college football playoff. And I think that bracket that you showed, I'm picking them to go pretty far because I think they could get hot with the offense and defense combo. Not many teams I think are that balanced with the two sides of the ball. And it's really hard, I think, if you're not a traditional like a Georgia, like Ohio State and Alabama to get to this point, to have everything like the stars aligned. You got the coach, you've got the roster, the transfer portal, the talent and the schedule to all align this season to do it. And I think it's going to be tough next year to try to run this back. So that's kind of why. I mean, I gave him a B, but I'm kind of second guessing it now because it really is missed opportunity given everything they had this year, and to be 9-3 in the Gator Bowl and playing Duke is, I think, fair to say, pretty disappointing. The Georgia win was good, South Carolina was good, and winning the Egg Bowl good, but like I said, 2 plays away from the college football playoff.
Yeah, well,
thanks,
cousin Brandon. I gotta spin it the other way. He just gave us $100, Steven. Said, don't worry, we will reload. He's a big Ole Miss guy. So let me spin it this way. I know I just threw him under the bus, but they deserve it. They blew this season, but they're saying this Austin Simmons is the next Tua. I mean, I've heard those comparisons, and we saw him against Georgia. He looked awesome, and they're in conversations with Barry and Brown. I believe Kevin Concepcione, if that's his name, at NC State. I mean, so they're right in there with some of the top transfers, and they can get there. They can get there again. But the schedule release in 2 days, live on the show. It's interesting though, Steve. You're going to have to go at Georgia. You get South Carolina, which for all I know, they might be the best team in the SEC next year. LSU. This is a manageable schedule next year. So they could be right in the position, maybe not with those expectations. But what I'm worried about, Steven, I don't know where you're at with this, but the thing that Ole Miss did that was an A this year was their defense. Their defense was awesome. Pete Golding, what a hire he's been as a coach, as a recruiter, everything. He's giving it to you. But a lot of those guys are gone. Can you reload the defense? I don't know. I think it's questionable. So I think we got to go back to being an offensive team. At least the strength of the team's got to be the offense. And I got faith in if the quarterback Simmons is who they're saying he is with Kiffin, yes, they'll be fine. But for the rest of my life, I don't think I'll get over this season not making the playoff.
I think that sounds a lot like me at like 2:00 in the morning when I'm being like frustrated. Look at college. I need better help to get over my frustration. Don't miss the playoff this year. I do think you said something important there, which is I believe in Austin Simmons based upon what we saw this year. And obviously dangerous to believe small sample sizes translate to a full season, but he was impressive. And, Concepcion, the receiver from NC State, I think is going to be very highly sought after in the portal. One other name to watch for Ole Miss is Ahmad Hardy. He is a running back from Louisiana Monroe. He ran for over 1,000 yards this year, one of the top freshmen in the country. I think he has been kind of connected to Ole Miss. It would not surprise me if he could be a day one starter for that team. So I kind of expect Lane will find a way to build an offense and he'll portal shop. I think the thing that worries me, and this is kind of what you're getting at, is guys like Walter Nolan don't enter the portal every time. Like that is an A+ defensive lineman. And yes, there are going to be a lot of offensive linemen and defensive linemen that enter the portal, but are they all America caliber in the SEC? That's where I have a hard time finding them being able to run that back. Now, I think Pete Golding's pretty good, and I think they'll be fine on that side of the ball. Their home schedule next year, Mike, like you said, is it's favorable, but you also look at that road slate. I mean, at Oklahoma could be better. The Egg Bowl on the road, and of course at Georgia, they should sweep the non-conference schedule. So it really might come down to, can you handle the swing games at home with Florida, LSU, or South Carolina if you want to get back in the playoff mix? If I had to take a guess, I would probably have them in my top 25 right now next season. Maybe not in the top 10, but probably somewhere in that 10 to 20 range.
Right. And I just looked it up because I remember I was just trying to see how long ago it was. It was the last recruiting cycle. So second-year players, they cleaned up with a lot of in-state defensive linemen that were touted guys. So maybe by year 2, still that's a lot. That's a lot to ask. Second-year defensive linemen to play to the level of these guys that they just had. But maybe their hopes are, Stephen, that those young guys will emerge. I would imagine that's kind of the strategy that Pete Golding had. Because again, I think Pete Golding's a hell of a defensive coordinator. He's just not Kirby Smart. And hell, I don't. There is not another one. And that's why Alabama fans hated him, because he wasn't Kirby Smart.
And I think Jaheim Otis has been also connected to Ole Miss.
There you go.
So I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe you kind of, and really, I do think if you want to build a roster, you want to have homegrown plus like a few portal additions. So maybe you're not as portal heavy, but maybe the additions are just as impactful, plus your homegrown guys. And maybe there's not a significant drop, but still, I still think it's going to be hard to replicate the Walter Nolans and Princely's and those guys across the board right away next year.
Yeah. Oh man, appreciate you, Brandon. He's feeling generous.
Oh, thanks, cuz.
He must have got a bonus at work or something. He said coaching did suck this year. We appreciate you for $50. So it did. But
Pete Golding.
Not Pete Golding. Yeah, Pete Golding he should be up for the Broyles Award. I don't think he is. He should be. All right, how about I think I know where we're going on this one. Mississippi State.
Mike, I gave Mississippi State a D-, and I graded.
You're still. What are you doing? Watching the EKU tape or something there, Stephen? What are you grading about here?
I gave Jeff Lebby a little bit of like a discount because of the mess that he inherited in Starkville. Just 2 returning starters from last year. Obviously, Eastern Kentucky, UMass, great wins. Getting beat by a average Toledo team, 41-17, not great. Every loss in SEC play decided by 10+ points, not great. But I thought, given the situation, given the circumstances, it's like a year -0. I had to give him a little bit of a grade on the curve there. So that's why it's a D-, but otherwise it probably should be an F.
Yeah, I'm giving him an F here. This was awful. And again, they show signs of life. I mean, they never quit. They fought hard, even down to the Egg Bowl. I mean, that was about the only game I saw their defense looked pretty good. Was the Egg Bowl. So, but I mean, that's literally the nicest thing I can say about Mississippi State. I mean, this is awful, Stephen. This is a proud program that bare minimum should win 6 games. I mean, they had the longest bowl streak behind Georgia, and I guess it would have been Alabama, but they had like the 3rd longest bowl streak there for a long while, from Dan Mullen to Joe Moorhead to Mike Leach till last season. So this is unacceptable. I don't know what in the world they're doing on defense. How Holtzler is still employed, I'll never know. That tells me they're unserious about football. But the fact that they're getting Jackson Arnold, I think that tells me they are serious about a turnaround. So that's about the only thing I can sell right now. It's an F for me.
If I was Mark Stoops, I would call Joe Moorhead at Akron and say, what would it take for you to be my offensive coordinator? But anyways, that's a discussion for another day. You could argue, I think, winning 2 games, actually, I know they inherited an impossible roster situation, but they probably underachieved. I mean, they lost to a bad Toledo team, and they were largely uncompetitive in the SEC. Kind of at minimum, you kind of just expect them to find a win somewhere in SEC play, much like Kentucky did against Ole Miss. But this was a big rebuilding project, and there's still a long way to go for Jeff Lebby.
Mm-hmm. All right, how about Missouri? What do you got for them, Stephen?
I gave Missouri a B-. 20 wins over the last 2 years. That is the best 2-year stretch for Missouri since 2013 to 2014. But a little bit of a missed opportunity here, given the roster, given the schedule, chance to go to the college football playoff. Obviously, Brady Cook's injury had some impact late in the season. Kind of a step back on offense and defense from a statistical standpoint. So solid 9-3, but also, like I said, not really in the playoff hunt after kind of expected to be this year.
Sorry, Stephen, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing. This comment got me. Slim. Mizzou went out of business instead of staying all business. But that was just too good not to share. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm giving them a C. Shane and I hyped them up a little way too much. We thought they were playoff bound, and hell, they were reasonably close. But the problem was they got blown out in their first 2 losses, and that all but eliminated them. Now, had they beaten Carolina, and they damn near did on the road, at 10-2, I mean, their schedule's better than Indiana. I know Indiana went 11-1, but I mean, apparently the committee only cares about your record. So, I think they were a game away from making the playoff. And again, quarterback injuries killed them. They had no shot against Alabama. How they won that Oklahoma game, I'll never know. But this was a tough team that when things, again, we thought the defense, at least I thought the defense would be awful. And they were going to have to score 40 points per game. It was like flip-flop. The defense came out, played really well, 2 consecutive shutouts. And then the offense, it took them, I don't know why, but it took them 2.5 months to get going. But once they did, they were a much better team. So this was a tough one, Stephen. I think 9-3 with a chance to go 10-3. That should always be celebrated in this conference. But it feels a little disappointing. But again, I overhyped the hell out of this team, so maybe that's on me. I don't think they have anything to be embarrassed about. Instead of other than maybe that A&M performance was pretty bad, and again the Alabama loss. It was that was on a quarterback that was not ready for the moment.
The offense averaged 23.5 points a game, down from about 36 the previous year. It did take about 2 months for this offense to find that next level that we expected. So some strange things during the season. But also I think you could argue they beat pretty much everybody you expect, and they kind of lost to the teams that they were supposed to. So that I think, that's kind of why I had them as a B-. They kind of just ended up about where you expected given the schedule and everything else that transpired with those teams this year.
Mm. Oh, we got one more from Brandon. Appreciate you, brother. $20. He says,
Thanks, cuz.
can Ole Miss get Missouri instead of Kentucky next year? He's literally the only man in the world that is scared of Kentucky, but I understand it. We all understand why. But all right, how about Oklahoma, Stephen? I'm fascinated to know where you go here.
Mike, I wrestled with this one too, because I was going to have Oklahoma as a D, probably headed into the final month of the season. But I'm going to give Brent Venables a little bit of credit here. They kind of worked their way out of this, got to a bowl game by crushing Alabama. That win counts for something for me. So I'm going to go with a C-. They had a rough time transitioning to the SEC, all the offensive issues, the injuries, things like that. It's, some of that stuff's just unpredictable, random bad luck. So don't want to hold that against him. I will hold the Seth Luttrell hire against him. Did not work out. 2-6 in SEC play, needed a crazy interception to beat Auburn, interception return, and of course the blowout win over Alabama, which kind of bumped this from a D to a C- for me.
Yeah, and I hate to say it this way, Stephen, but and I don't even know how you quantify this in your head. You're a smart guy. I think you'll figure it out. If Oklahoma's offense was as good as the defense this year, this is probably a playoff team, don't you think?
I could maybe get to them being certainly up in the top. I'm looking at their schedule. I mean, they would have lost probably to Texas,
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina, Tennessee. I mean, I could easily see them being a lot higher, like at 9-3, or I mean, maybe if you want to be like super optimistic, if they had like Dylan Gabriel's offense from last year, yeah,
Right.
I mean, I would say they'd be right there in the conversation because their defense was legitimately good enough this year. I know certainly some of the games like giving up 37 to LSU, 30 against Missouri is a little deceiving, but I mean, held Ole Miss to 26. So yeah, I would buy that.
Now the problem, Stephen, their offense is about as good as Kentucky's offense. I mean, it
Yeah.
was awful. It was dreadful. It was disgusting. But much like you, I would say that Alabama game kind of flipped the script a little bit and gave them extra credit here. I'm giving them a C minus because again, there was a lot that went wrong, and a lot of teams would have caved. And I still have my doubts on whether Brent Venables is the man for the job. But hell, I know after watching this team this year that he's a hell of a defense coordinator. So I think the defense is in excellent hands in Norman, but he's got to figure out the offense. And I'm not over the moon on the OC hire. We'll see what they do at quarterback, but that's going to go a long, long way to figure out if Brent Venables is the man for the job. But I think we go into next year. I think we go into kind of unsettled ground, so to speak, in Norman.
I think well, I would say I hope it's not a hot take, but I do think he's inching closer to the hot seat. Like if you go 6-6 next year, I think you're probably starting to get into hot seat territory. I like the Ben Arbuckle hire. I do wonder where Oklahoma goes at quarterback because there's going to be a lot of competition for the Miller Moss, the Darian Minsas, some of the other guys that could enter the portal. So really, really important. I think Venables is great on defense, but you often see this like when defensive coordinators become head coaches, their biggest obstacle is finding the right OC hire. And that's still the biggest problem for Venables right now. Obviously, he nailed the Levy one. He's got to nail the next one here.
All right, how about South Carolina, Stephen?
Mike, I think this was an easy A. It's not how you start, but how you finish if you're South Carolina. Kind of wondered where this team was early in the year. Of course, the game against Old Dominion and trying to figure out after the first month where this team could end up. But man, they really got it going later in the season with those 6 straight victories, exceeded all expectations. Love the development of the offense under Lenora Sellers. Great job this year for Dowd Loggins in doing so. Also, the defense cut the scoring down by almost 7 points a game in SEC play from last season. So Clayton White also did a great job with that defense this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I'm going A for the Gamecocks, Stephen. They smashed expectations. I expect Shane Beamer is going to be SEC Coach of the Year, the hottest team in the country. And if we can get to 10 wins, I think we're going to have so much momentum going into next season. And all they have done is prove the doubters wrong time and time again. Famously, Shane against Kentucky. He had to go down to Columbia the next week with a sign. A&M. I'm pretty sure I know I picked A&M to beat them. Not even close. Clemson, I mean, won the state once again. This is just a tremendous season, and I wish, oh, how I wish they didn't get robbed, and they'd be 10-2. They'd be in the college football playoff, but I'm going to quit saying that at some point in time. It's not going to be today. But give them an A, easy A, like you said, Stephen. I think the Gamecocks, one of the best teams, and it came out of nowhere. So hell of a job by Beamer and company.
Also, I think we talk about vibes for certain teams. I think South Carolina is probably one of the programs in the country who probably changed the vibes around the team more than anybody from like September to October to November. I mean, you go from kind of low expectations, kind of where's this going, to potential playoff team, and now start thinking ahead for next year that they might have the best quarterback in the SEC, and all the expectations are maybe to be a playoff team. So great job all around for South Carolina this year.
All right. How about Tennessee, Stephen? They're in the playoff 10-2. Did lose to Arkansas, though. But what's your grade for Tennessee?
Mike, I thought this was an A minus. I could go for A or A minus here. Really good season, obviously. If you make the college football playoff, it's hard to argue that it was a bad season. They won 10 games, reached the playoff, beat Alabama, and beat Florida. Like, that's a pretty good season for a Tennessee coach. I would still like to see the passing game and the offense kick it up a notch, but obviously the defense was one of the best in the SEC. The Arkansas game drops this down for me a little bit. I might be willing to go A plus or A had they won that game, but that loss at Fayetteville drops it down to an A minus.
Well, Stephen, here's where you're wrong. The better grader is here. A for Tennessee. Any year you beat Florida, any year you beat Alabama and Florida. Man, it's a hell of a year. Uh-oh. Bad news. This live stream says it only goes 2 hours, so I think it's about to get cut off. Wait, I think we're still live. Okay, well, it told me it was going to end, but maybe it's going to end at another time. But anyway, you beat Florida, you beat Alabama. That's an A. I mean, that Oklahoma game, I know Oklahoma turned out to be not that great, but that was a big time game. That was a huge game that I think it kind of, set the narrative for those two teams for the rest of the season. Yeah, they lost to Arkansas. Who cares, Stephen? They bounced back. They made it to the college football playoff. And unless you're Georgia, where the bar is like national championship or bust, and I don't even know if that's fair anymore for Georgia, given the state of college football. But if you make the playoff, it's an A. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Tennessee, one of 3 teams to make the college football playoff. And hell, I don't even think they played their best football yet. So if they do that, they can win it all. Give me an A.
It's hard to disagree. It feels like Tennessee could still play. It feels like Tennessee has another level it can go if it can sort of unlock that offensive potential. So I thought easy, like I said, easy A, whether it's A or A minus. I feel very good about Tennessee's season being in that category.
All right, how about Texas? What'd you got the grade for them?
Mike, I gave Texas an A. I thought, kind of similar sense of Tennessee. If you make the playoff, if you go to the SEC championship game, if you beat Michigan at Michigan and you beat Texas A&M, best defense maybe in the country, offense a little bit up and down at times, but still averaged almost 34 points a game. A very successful debut for Steve Sarkisian and Texas in the SEC.
Yeah, A plus for me, Stephen. They marched through this damn conference. Except for Georgia. But Georgia owns all of us, so no surprise there. They exceeded my wildest expectations. I didn't think the defense would be as good as last year. Hell, they're better than last year on the defensive side of the football. Remember, they got devastated with injuries at running back. They just had new running backs emerge. They got all their portal guys came in and seemingly made an instant impact. That's very, very difficult to do. Give me an A plus. Texas, I think they were awesome. They may win the national championship unless they play Georgia. Then they probably won't. But anyone else, Texas can beat, except for maybe Tennessee.
I agree. I think this is a team very capable of winning the national championship for all the factors. Dominant defense, an offense that, when it's rolling, could put up 30, 40 points a game. Got to like the development of Wisner late in the season. Also credit to Sark for some of the additions at receiver, settling in Matthew Golden, Wingo too later in the season. So all the pieces are there for Texas to win it all this year.
All right. How about Texas A&M, Stephen?
Mike, I'm going B plus here. Obviously feels like Mike Elko has this program going in the right direction, but the trend later in the season was it lost 3 out of the last 4 games, lost to Notre Dame. Some of the tougher teams they faced, they fell short against, but they were in the playoff conversation going into November, and it feels like they can only get better from here. So a good start for Mike Elko, B plus, but room to grow going forward.
I'm going B minus, Stephen, because heading into November, look like a lock for the playoff. No locks for the SEC championship because there was that Texas game looming. But man, I feel like the whole thing kind of came apart on us. And hell, I don't count New Mexico State. That's garbage. But the last 3, you had it all there in front of you, and it fell apart. Now they did exceed my wildest expectations up to that point. So again, B minus. I'm not writing them off or anything. I think they're doing a hell of a job, but year one, they got better, much better, I thought. And it's just that final month, Stephen. Just beat Auburn. If you beat Auburn, how could you not beat Auburn? I'd give you a B plus, probably, maybe even an A. But that was tough, and especially the fashion. I mean, they jumped out 21-0 on you, and maybe a better showing against Texas. That was awful. But I think Texas is just truly an elite team, and you're just not there. I think you're close. You're getting there, but you're not. You're clearly not elite. So give me B minus, or at least you weren't this year. B minus for Mike Elko. I think it was a tremendous debut for Elko, but you ran out of gas, and it's hard for me to overlook that.
Yeah, I think what you said there is right on, because when I think about the Texas game, I never really felt like they were in it, like outside of maybe like the first couple minutes of the game once Texas took control. Notre Dame pretty much controlled the second half, lost by 24 to South Carolina. So some of the challenges against top-ranked teams, they fell way short, but also you can look at and say it does feel like I said, the program's going in the right direction, and they went into the final month with a chance to make the playoff. Like, that is a step forward for this program, and I feel good about where Elko's going with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, how about last one, Vanderbilt? Stephen, where are you going with the doors?
Mike, this was very easy. Give me an A minus for Vanderbilt this season. I could maybe even go A plus, just because they exceeded preseason expectations by far. Getting to 6 victories when most people, probably including myself, thought, hey, probably just getting to 1 win in SEC play was a good thing. But loved the way Clark Lee reinvented the program this offseason, taking over play calling duties on defense, had an impact. Jerry Kill, Diego Pavia, Tim Beck nailed each one of those hires in the portal. And of course, who could forget the big win over Alabama and the celebration that ensued after. They lost a little steam down the stretch, but still 6 wins. That's a great season for Vanderbilt. So give me A minus.
Heck yeah, I love it, Stephen. Give me an A. A for the Commodores. You kept the big A out of the playoffs, so you probably deserve an A plus. Vanderbilt, season to remember, one of the best I can ever recall, and you're getting an opportunity to go to one of the most entertaining bowl games, even if you lose it. This is a great year, but what a cap it would be, Stephen, to win the bowl game over Georgia Tech, finish with a winning record, first time since I can't even remember when. I don't even think Derek Mason ever had a winning season, did he? I know he had a bowl season or two.
Well, yeah, it feels like you definitely have to go back to the Franklin era for sure for a winning record. Mason did not have a winning season. His best was 6-7.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it here. Since 2013. So
yeah.
Oh, Vanderbilt. But you've got yourself up the mat. We're not worried about the last dozen years. We're worried about this year. A job. Heck, maybe Clark Lee's coach of the year. I would have no problem with that. I think it should be Beamer. But if they give it to him, I will have no issues whatsoever with that. Stephen, I've taken up way too much of your time. Anything before we hop off the line here?
Mike, what a great season that we've had so far with all the regular season games and everything still to come. Just looking forward to the playoff and the bowl games and, of course, the portal happenings. It feels like, it's supposed to be a lull, but I feels like it's going to be pretty action-packed here. So can't wait to talk to you, all the cousins again real soon about all the happenings.
Yeah, we've got over 2 hours. There's probably 1,000 more players that entered the transfer portal. So we'll have to jump in there and check it out. But we'll be back tomorrow. Cousin Shane, live, normal time. Appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast. Hail State.